In this tutorial, I explained the SumIf function and its more powerful sibling, the SumIfs function. You get to see a live example of the SumIf function and SumIfs in action. You will also get to see how you can verify results from these functions using Excel's autofilter. As a bonus, I also explain how these functions can get some extra help from Excel's subtotal, indirect and counta functions. If you find this tutorial useful, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and you can also get extra information by getting on the businessprogrammer.com notification list at businessprogrammer.com. Enjoy. So SumIf is a kind of data querying function. It's got limited functionality, but it's quite useful if you just want to query one criteria element. So let me give you an example here. You can see here that SumIf takes three arguments, basically range, criteria and SumRange. Well, let's ask this data a question using the advanced filter and at the same time answer it using SumIf. So if you look here, I'm using a subtotal function, and so you use subtotal and the argument 9 followed by the range that you want to sum, and what that does is it basically reacts to in this instance it will react to the autofilter. So let's say, for example, I want to know what is the total volume within this data set of ABEV stock traded on the market, and in this instance it's going to be the NYSE, but we just say on the market. So I just click ABEV and the answer is 313 million. Let's now answer that same question using SumIf. Equals SumIf and the range that we're going to choose. So as you can see, the arguments have been suggested there: range, criteria and SumRange. Now the range that we're going to use is going to be the criteria range, and in this instance the criteria is the ticker. So the criteria will start on the first data row, which is in this instance F4. So if I click on the ticker element F4 and I'm going to go down, I'm going to do F4 to F65,000 because that allows for expansion of the data in the future. And the criteria is going to be ABEV because that is the stock that we want to get information on. So ABEV, and the SumRange in this instance is the volume column. So that's going to be in D4. So if I just click on D4 and I'm going to go down to D65,000. It's very important on these SumIf formulas and SumIfs, which we'll talk about later, that the amount of rows is the same for every argument to your function. So if I close that off now, it should work. Okay, so as you can see, using these criteria, we've been able to come up with 313,904,000, which is the same as the auto sum. But that's not really a very useful query because it's only giving me one argument, which doesn't really make much sense. So what if in this instance I want to know all the volume traded for ABEV on the NYSE on a Friday? If I go to the auto filter and first I'm going to choose the NYSE, then I'm going to choose ABEV, and then I'm going to choose Fridays. Now that gives me a figure of 55 million. Now using SumIf, I would have to create three separate SumIfs to do that, which really is not ideal. So instead I'm going to use the SumIfs function. So SumIfs begins with the SumRange. In this instance that would be the volume column, followed by the criteria range 1, the first criteria range. So in this instance, that for example could be the market, which is the NYSE. So the criteria range would be something like G4 to G65,000, which is the market column. Then you would put in the criteria elements that you want to use, in this instance the NYSE. Now here we have criteria range N to criteria N. With the SumIfs function, you can put in multiple criteria, which is why I say n, because it can be any number of criteria. Let's do that now. So we start off with the sum range, which is the volume column. So equals SumIfs, and pasting in sheet 1 D4 to D65,000. Now I put in the criteria range, which is column G. So I'm just going to change this D to a G. And then the criteria for the market is NYSE, followed by the next criteria element that we said was going to be the ticker. Well, the ticker is going to be ABEV, so let's paste in the ticker column. And the criteria for the ticker column is ABEV, followed by the final criteria element, which is going to be weekdays, being Friday. And the criteria that we want is going to be Friday. And I close out the function. And it helps if I name the function correctly. It's not SumIs, it's SumIfs. Now let's try it. There we go. We have a SumIf function giving us the same answer as the autofilter. So what we've done is we have summed the volume range, giving it a criteria of NYSE and a criteria of ABEV for the stock and a criteria of Friday for the weekdays. Now, my pet hate when dealing with Excel functions is that they can become very difficult and complex to audit spreadsheets, be it your own spreadsheet when you've come back to it a year down the line, or a few months or weeks even down the line, or most of the point somebody else's spreadsheet. Now also with this SumIfs function, you can see that if you have a whole load of them on a spreadsheet, things can get really complicated real fast in terms of asking yourself the question, well, what is D4 to D6500, or what is F4 to F65,000 rather? But you know, it's simple here, but imagine a spreadsheet with 20 tabs and lots of ifs functions cross-referencing across different tabs. So let's see if we can do something now just to make this function a little bit more readable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a dynamic range reference without using any VBA code. So we won't have to go down to cell 65,000 or row 65,000. We will accurately reference the range. I'm going to use two particular Excel functions, one being counta. Counta counts all the non-blank rows in a range, and I'm going to use indirect. What indirect does is it translates a string or a text reference into an actual range reference. You'll see what it does here. Okay, so now I'm going to create a more user-friendly version of the SumIfs function, which makes it easier to edit and easier to know what's actually going on in the formula. So step one is I'm going to create some labels. So the first label will be start row, for the start row of the data. The next label will be end row, volume, which is going to represent the volume field. Then we have weekdays, and then we're going to have market, and then ticker. So here we go. Well, we know the start row is 4, so I'm just going to hard code that in. And we're now going to use the counta function. Now counta counts all the non-blank cells in a range. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to measure the amount of non-blank cells within this data range. Because the data range doesn't start on row 1, we're going to have to add in the number 3 to take into account the first 3 rows which aren't data. So that's row 1, row 2, and row 3, which is the header row. Okay, so we can see the data goes down to row 269, and you can verify that by looking at this spreadsheet here where the first blank row is row 270. Okay, so we're good there. So now volume is in column D, so it's going to be equals sheet 1, because the data is on sheet 1, and notice we're on sheet 2 here, so we're referring to a different sheet. So what I'm going to do is open quotes, sheet 1, exclamation mark or bang, whichever you want to call it, and then it's going to be for volume D and then close quotes and then the ampersand, so D4 and then ampersand again, open quotes, the colon, and then D, close quotes, ampersand again, and the end row. So now we have sheet 1 D4 to D269. Now the other thing we need to do is make this F2 and F3, we need to make these cells references absolute rather than relative, because I want to copy this down among the 3 cells beneath it, and otherwise what's going to happen is F2 will become F3 and F3 will become F4, and what will happen is then it's just out of alignment. So I press the F4 key to put dollar signs around the F and the 2, and if I press it again you'll see it now becomes $F $3, which makes these cells absolute. So now if I press enter, I can now copy these cells down and the addresses will stay the same. There we go. So in actual, all I now need to do is to change D in each of these instances. So weekdays we know is actually column B, not column D. So if I highlight the B, and if I highlight the D and make it a B, and highlight this D and make it a B and press enter, we now have weekdays sheet 1 B4 to B269, which is correct. Market is actually in column G, so let's change the D to a G, and enter, and ticker is in column F, so let's change the D to an F. Now the other thing we need to do to make this a little bit more visually easier to work with is I'm going to create a label called criteria. And the criteria is going to apply to, I guess, these cells here. So weekdays we know are going to be Friday, and we know that market is going to be NYSE, and we know that ticker is going to be ABEV. So let's now make our SumIf function. Now one other thing that we can do which will make this even clearer is we can range name these. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to formulas, create name from selection, and I'm going to choose the names in the left column. So now you can see this is called start row, end row, volume, weekdays, market. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just type another SumIfs, but in this instance it's going to be equals SumIfs, and the first argument is the sum range. Now we know the sum range is volume, so if I type indirect volume, which you can see the cell already been highlighted. So what's happening here with this indirect function is it's looking at the contents of cell F4, which is the volume cell, and it's saying, okay, the text that's in that cell, it's not ordinary text, translate it into a range. Without the indirect, it would just take that text as it is, basically. So we've translated that into a range. So criteria range 1 will be weekdays. So indirect again. The actual criteria for weekdays is Friday. So I'm just going to click on the Friday cell. And criteria range 2 is going to be market. And the actual criteria for market is NYSE. And criteria range 4 is going to be ticker. And the ticker is going to be ABEV. So we click on that. Now I just close it out and we have our result, which happens to be the same, 55,108,800. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, what it means is that simply, rather than looking at a function like this, which is kind of cryptic, I can look at this function and it says, okay, so we're working on the volume field and we've got a criteria of weekdays and market and ticker, and oh, okay, it's nice and neatly set up over here. So I wonder what happens if I change the weekdays to Wednesday. Oh, so we got 87509. Okay, so let's just verify that by doing an autofilter for Wednesday. And 87509 400. So what you've got here, I suppose you've got your SumIf function, which can take one criteria, and you've got your SumIfs function, which can take multiple criteria and actually refine your query. This, in my opinion, is still a little bit less powerful than the dsum function, but this gets the job done as well. BusinessProgrammer.com provides tutorials on all aspects of business programming, so you can automate time-consuming tasks or learn helpful hacks towards better productivity. We do this using inexpensive tools such as Microsoft Office and free tools such as LibreOffice and Python, to name a few. To get notified of all updates and free stuff, get on the newsletter at BusinessProgrammer.com and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Bye for now.